Hey everyone, April here. Welcome back to my channel where we talk all things Power Platform and Microsoft 365. So if any of you know me or been following me for a while, then you kind of know my background of being in a SharePoint developer role and doing a lot of InfoPath and SharePoint Designer workflows back in the day. And then I transitioned, of course, into more of the Power Platform. So I thought I would make a quick video because yesterday, Tuesday, was actually kind of a monumental day when it comes to InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. As of yesterday, Tuesday, July 13th, 2021, both InfoPath 2013 and SharePoint Designer 2013 are now officially out of mainstream support and are into the extended support cycle. So I wanted to make a quick video for you all explaining what exactly this means for the products being out of mainstream support and briefly touch on what the alternatives are and give you some guidance and things to think about as far as moving on from InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. So I'll break that all down right after this. Let's start off by clarifying what I mean by the end of mainstream support. All Microsoft products have an application lifecycle. The typical lifecycle for most products is about 10 years. And that typical lifecycle is split into two sections. We have mainstream and we have extended support. And you usually split the difference where mainstream support lasts about 5 years of the lifecycle, and then the extended support lasts an additional 5 years after mainstream support ends. If we look at the case of InfoPath and SharePoint Designer, though, you see we got a little bit of an extended cycle here. The mainstream support just ended yesterday on July 13th. Now, InfoPath and SharePoint Designer 2013 were obviously released back in 2013, and it's 2021 now, so we got a full 8 years of mainstream support for these products. So they kept kind of extending it a bit since just so many people were using InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. So what this means is from this point on, mainstream support has ended. So now it's going into that 5-year extended support phase before eventually it is reaching its end of life. Now let's talk about what is the difference, what do we get in mainstream support, and what does it mean to be now in this extended support cycle. Now, when we have an application that is in the mainstream support phase, that means we have it all. We get all the latest new releases. It's constantly being updated with service packs and new design updates. Bug fixes and security patches are being put out, and you get no charge incident support. Now that InfoPath and SharePoint Designer 2013 are out of this mainstream phase and into the extended phase, that means that we no longer have new releases. So there's not going to be any new features or any new releases for InfoPath or SharePoint Designer 2013. There's going to be no product design changes. And from the support side of things, that means that if you do need any kind of support, you will have to use the paid support. There's no more of that no charge support included once a product reaches this extended support phase. Now, we still do get security updates applied. So if any major security issues arise, those will be taken care of in this extended window that we have. So this is really important to understand where we're at, because I know, given my experience in consulting, I built a ton of InfoPath forms and SharePoint Designer workflows in my day, and I just know how many companies are still relying on InfoPath and SharePoint Designer for some business critical processes. So I really wanted to make this video to point out we've really reached a new era, and it's making it even that more important that we start considering and making sure that we have a plan to get off of InfoPath and SharePoint Designer and into something else. Because now that we're in this new phase, there's not going to be any more updates. We're not going to get any free support, just the basic security updates that it needs to function. And if we look back at that timeline, we see that this extended support phase only lasts until July of 2026. And at that time, InfoPath and SharePoint Designer 2013 will reach end of life. They will be no more. So what is the path forward here? Well, for InfoPath, the successor to that is Microsoft Power Apps. I talk a lot about that here on my channel. And for SharePoint Designer 2013, the successor to that is Power Automate's, another thing that I'm sure you've heard me talk a lot about. And notice I said the word that these tools, Power Apps and Power Automate, are the successors to InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. I didn't say the replacement. And there is an important reason why I'm using the term successor over replacement. Power Apps and Power Automate aren't meant to be complete feature parity replacements for InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. They are much more than that. So that's something to keep in mind when you're going down the process of getting ready to move off of InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. Those are the successors. We can recreate our InfoPath forms and our SharePoint Designer workflows in each of these tools correspondingly, but the scope is just so much more broad and they're so much more powerful that it will be a different mindset that you take on when you go down this path, if you haven't already. And so that's why I say at that final bullet point there will be a learning curve. I don't want to mislead anyone here. These are really completely different tools that we're using here. So just like any technology, learning anything new, whether it's, learning how to use Word for the first time or Excel or whatever it might be, there's going to be just a little bit of a learning curve to get up to speed, to feel comfortable transitioning off of InfoPath and SharePoint Designer into the Power Platform. And one of the main things I wanted to address here, so I wanted to make sure I cover the most frequently asked question I get when it comes to InfoPath and SharePoint Designer and the Power Platform. So we mentioned Power Apps and Power Automate are the successors, and that's what we should be moving towards if we want to stick in the Microsoft ecosystem to hold those. So the question I get is, what do we use to migrate this? And unfortunately, there's not any one tool that's going to automatically just take an existing InfoPath form and move that for you into a Power App and take a SharePoint Designer workflow and move that into a Power Automate flow. So I wanted to make sure I address that. It is going to be more of a manual type process to move off of InfoPath and Designer into the Power Platform. But trust me, it is so worth it. There is so much more that we can do with these products than we could in, say, InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. So Power Apps is just far more robust than InfoPath. But yet it still has a lot of the same stuff that we're used to and that we need with InfoPath and building forms based in SharePoint. So it has native integration into SharePoint list forms. So with your list and libraries, you know how we have that customized option for InfoPath? We have that same capability with Power Apps to do that. And we also have the ability to create what's called standalone applications that we can consume information from our SharePoint list in as well. One of the huge advantages of Power Apps is the fact that you can create a single application which will work seamlessly on a desktop, tablet, or mobile device, something that wasn't necessarily true about InfoPath. And what really sets it apart is the connector model. So Power Platform, both Power Apps and Power Automate share this in common, has a rich set of connectors which are used to communicate with a variety of services, from Microsoft services to other third-party applications, and even services behind your firewall on-premise, and custom APIs that you might want to connect to. There are over 200 different data sources that we can consume in Power Apps and over 400 in Power Automate. And the design is pretty similar to what you might be familiar with in InfoPath as far as being very drag and drop friendly. So you can drag and drop different controls on the screen to build an app, and you've seen this a million times if you watched any of my previous videos. But where it does differ from InfoPath is on the logic layer. InfoPath kind of had that point and click rules approach of building in some logic. With Power Apps, that conditional logic and that type of stuff is really done through formulas, a formula language that's based off of Excel called PowerFX. I do have a video on PowerFX that I will reference here that you can go and watch if you want to learn more about that. But that is a key difference, and that's probably where most, I would say, of the learning curve when you're coming from just a straight InfoPath background and trying to convert that to Power Apps comes in, is getting used to that formula language and how you can use that to do things like conditional formatting, which what you would do in InfoPath, and role-based security, cascading dropdowns, and things like that. So all things that Power Apps can do, it's just a little bit of a different way of handling it than you would have did in InfoPath. It can also handle tabular data and tables and workflow integration. And then Power Automate, the same thing. So we have that same connector model. It's way more robust than SharePoint Designer. It's not limited to just consuming and interacting with SharePoint data. With those connectors, we can create workflows in Power Automate that connect to Salesforce and Dropbox and your own internal APIs and on-prem data and all of that. One of the most common things that we did with SharePoint Designer workflows is to automate approval processes in SharePoint. So we have the same built-in native integration with SharePoint List that we did in SharePoint Designer that we have now in Power Automate. So there's an automate button in our SharePoint list and libraries where we can kick off workflows directly from our SharePoint list items. And we have a built-in approval engine that is, to me, night and day better than the approval mechanisms that we had in SharePoint Designer. And of course, with some of the connectors we have, we can even do things like e-signatures with things like the DocuSign or the Adobe Sign connectors. Now you're probably wondering, I did mention there's a little bit of a learning curve for the tool. So what are the best ways for you if you've never used the Power Platform and you're wanting to get your InfoPath forms or SharePoint Designer workflows off of there and modernized and moved into the Power Platform? How do I learn what I need to do to complete the move off of there? So I put together a few resources that I think will really help you get up to speed with everything that you need to be able to move off of InfoPath in SharePoint Designer. So starting with Power Apps, there are several learning paths on Microsoft Learn that are going to be really helpful here. First, what I'm going to suggest is this Getting Started with Power Apps learning path. This walks you through everything that you need to know of how to get started creating a Canvas app, which is what you would probably be using if you're going to migrate from InfoPath to Power Apps. The next thing you're really going to need to know once you're familiar with the interface of how Power Apps works is really diving into that formula language, PowerFX, so that you can do some of those more advanced things like the conditional formatting. So for that, there's two resources I want to give you. One is this Power Apps formula reference. That's a list of every single formula that we offer with PowerFX that you can use in your Power Apps applications. So it's a great dictionary kind of thing that you can reference anytime you need to look up what a formula does. The other one is this learning path for getting started with Power Apps formulas. This walks you through in more detail how formulas work in Power Apps, what PowerFX is, and some specific use cases. And then the last learn plan I want to point you to in the process here is this one on developing a good UI or user experience inside of your Power Apps. So this walks you through more of how do I create a visually appealing application, what type of controls can I use, and things like that. And then finally, if you don't have something set up already at your organization to really be able to build Power Apps, and you want to just get your feet wet and learn the tool first before you start your migration project here to move off of InfoPath, I would suggest creating a Power Apps developer plan. So if you go to this link here, aka.ms/Power Apps-dev plan, you can go there and sign up for the developer plan that is completely free, and you can start creating Power Apps applications and testing it and see how it works. So as you go through some of these Learn modules, you can put what you're learning into practice. And then for Power Automate, there are two different learning paths I would suggest when it comes to integrating with SharePoint and moving off of SharePoint Designer. The first one is just a general getting started with Power Automate, a great introductory module. And then there's a specific learning path on integrating SharePoint with Power Automate. So that's going to get more into the details of handling approvals and doing some of those deeper SharePoint integrations. Another resource that I wanted to point out when it comes to migrating from SharePoint Designer to Power Automate is a LinkedIn Learning course that I did last year. So if you do have access to LinkedIn Learning, definitely check that out. I kind of walk through everything you need to know about the ins and outs of preparing for and taking your SharePoint Designer workflows into Power Automate. And of course on my channel here and other YouTube channels like say Shane Young, we have lots of content on Power Apps and Power Automate and learning some of the ins and outs of the tools. And for example, I just did a video on Power Automate and how to recreate the SharePoint Collect feedback workflow in Power Automate. So there's no shortage of Power Platform YouTubers out there that have great content that will help you get up to speed also. And last thing that I want to touch on, licensing is probably going to come up. Power Apps and Power Automate, you get a version of those tools included in most of your Microsoft 365 licenses. So if you're on Microsoft 365 and you're using SharePoint Online there, you probably have the version that will give you everything you need to be able to interact and create workflows and Power Apps applications that interact with your SharePoint data. If for some reason, say in your InfoPath form, you were calling another web service outside of SharePoint or in your SharePoint Designer, maybe you're making an HTTP call to another web service there, those solutions that you would be migrating over would require additional licensing other than what you get included with a Microsoft 365 licensing. So that is something to keep in mind there, and another thing you should be evaluating when you're thinking about moving off these solutions. But there's a great licensing guide that's out there on docs.microsoft.com, and all these links will be in the video description where you can go and figure out the prices and what licensing you need. Just wanted to make sure that you are all aware of what's going on in the world of InfoPath and SharePoint Designer, and really understanding that it is getting very important and the urgency is there to start moving those solutions off to the Power Platform, and hopefully you have some general guidance of the next steps that you should take to go down the journey of moving over to the Power Platform. So curious to see how many people watching this are still leveraging InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. And as always, greatly appreciate you watching. Do me a favor, if you did like this, give it a big thumbs up, and I'll catch you in the next video.